Chapter 7. The Dungeon Expedition Begins. I can't believe I survived that, Gideon groaned as he slid off Gun's back and took a few unsteady steps. He was tottering around like a newborn calf, and looked like he could collapse at any moment. The sickly pallor of his face did his Hollywood tear looks no favors, that was for sure. Gadino, meanwhile, let out a hefty grunt as he heaved himself off Gun's back with Sigvard slung over his shoulder. Phew! How is this man so heavy? He marveled as he dropped the short but heavily muscular dwarf to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Sigvard didn't reply, on account of him having passed out mere moments after Gun lifted off. Pathetic, Theodora jabbed at Gideon and Sigvard as she gracefully leapt to the ground. Shut up. At least I didn't pass out, okay? Gideon moaned. The fact that he'd planted his hands on his knees in an effort to stay upright made his case a little less than compelling, but I could understand where he was coming from. I had flown on Gun plenty of times at this point, and it was only very recently that I'd started getting used to the sensation. Even then, I couldn't help but think about how nice it was to be on solid ground again as I clambered down from Gun's back myself. Good. Now, let us proceed inside at once. With any luck, there will be something inside strong enough to even pique my interest. Hell yeah, let's do this. Dungeon time. My familiars were ready to plunge into the dungeon the second we touched down, but I quickly slammed on the brakes. No, not yet. Let's wait till tomorrow to head in, I said telepathically. That sure soured the mood in an instant. For what purpose? Fel grunted. Well, it's almost night time, isn't it? You guys'll be hungry for dinner pretty soon, and this'll be a lot more enjoyable if we take some time to eat and rest up now, and then go in tomorrow morning. Try to remember that we have company on this trip, I added, shooting a glance over at ARC's members. Gideon still looked just about ready to pass out, and Sigvard had yet to awaken. Rather feeble, are they not? Fel sighed. Peh. No kidding, Dora-chan spat. Feeble. Sway gleefully parroted. All this, simply from riding upon my back. I'm offended. If this is the thanks I get, then maybe I'll have them walk next time. Oh, don't be like that, I scolded, thankful that at the very least we hadn't had that exchange out loud. I could only imagine how depressed Gideon and Sigvard would have been if they'd overheard us. Everyone has things they just can't deal with, okay? And besides, I figured we'd find the dungeon in no time, since you two were so confident about it, but it ended up taking way longer than I was counting on, I noted. The extended search was why our flight had been such a prolonged one, as a matter of fact. Well, that is hardly our fault. The dungeon's location simply made it excessively difficult to notice. He's right, my liege. A dungeon this remote would be a challenge for anyone to find. Without us, there's no way you would ever have spotted it. I'm not denying that, but still, I replied. Fel and Gun did have a point. This dungeon, located somewhere in the territories of the small nations that bordered Leon Hot, really was in an incredibly inconvenient place. Its entryway was situated in the middle of a wasteland, hidden in a crevice formed by a number of massive boulders that looked like they had come straight out of a western. Finding the comparatively tiny hole that led inside would have been a major ordeal without their senses at our disposal. Well, regardless, we can go in tomorrow. Okay, I said. Chimpate. Very well. As you say, my liege. You hear that, Dora-chan, Sway? We're gonna head into the dungeon tomorrow. Dora-chan clicked his tongue. Fine, I guess, he grumbled. Oh, tomorrow? Sway whined. Come on, guys, it's not like I'm trying to cancel the trip altogether, and believe me, I'd really like to do just that. Anyway, I'll get to work on dinner, I said. I'd cooked up a stock of pre-made food back at the house, but I figured it would be better to save those meals for when we were actually in the dungeon. I decided to whip up something nice and quick for tonight instead, so the first thing I had to do was pull my newly obtained magic stove out of my item box. What in the Mukouda? Gadino yelped. Oh, that's right. I guess this is the first time they've seen my stove, isn't it? I was just about to start making dinner, I explained. My familiars are all big eaters, so I keep a magic stove with me to cook for them. That's one hell of a thing to just keep with you, Gadino whispered, though not quite quietly enough for me to not hear him. I guess it makes sense that this would surprise him, at least the first time. This is about as big and hardcore as magic stoves come, after all. I wouldn't be able to handle everyone's appetites with anything smaller, though. In any case, it was time to whip up some dinner. It had to involve meat, thanks to my party members' carnivorous tendencies, and when it came to meat dishes that could be made in a hurry, rice bowls were hard to beat. They'd become a go-to for us for a reason. What sort of bowl to make, though? I know. I'll go with sesame-flavored pork and cabbage bowls. They were a wonderfully appetizing dish, thanks to the fragrance of the ground, toasted sesame seeds that they were loaded up with, and more importantly, I wouldn't have to buy any ingredients from my online supermarket in order to make them. I couldn't exactly let the members of ARC see me opening the menu. After all, come to think of it, I should stock up on seasonings and stuff after everyone goes to bed tonight, just to be on the safe side. For the moment, though, I had some rice bowls to make. I'd be using dungeon pork for the meat, and some cabbage that I had on hand, which came straight from the garden Alban maintained back at home. As for the recipe, it could hardly be any easier. To start things off, I thinly sliced the dungeon pork, cut the slices up some more until they were nice and small, and chopped the cabbage into chunks. After that, I mixed together some soy sauce, sake, mirin, sugar, and white sesame seeds that had been toasted and ground into a powder. I heated some sesame oil in a frying pan, browned the dungeon pork, then added in the cabbage. Once the veggie chunks got nice and soft, I poured in the seasoning mixture I'd made before and stir-fried everything together to complete the dish. All I had left to do was bring out a pot of freshly cooked rice from my item box, pile it up in some bowls, add a scoop of the sesame-flavored pork and cabbage stir-fry, and top it all off with a sprinkle of sesame seeds. Okay, that should do it, I said to myself, right before I looked up and nearly jumped out of my skin. While I had been focused on my cooking, the gluttonous quartet had assembled in front of my magic stove, drooling and watching my every move with bated breath, and this time, they weren't alone. Theodora, please, I sighed. Arcself was right there alongside my familiars, eyes sparkling with excitement as she stared at the newly finished rice bowls. Yes, I know what you want. I'm bringing them over now, so go wait with the others, okay? A look of sorrow came over her face as I put the rice bowls and my magic stove away in my item box. Look, we're going to eat them in just a second, okay? Stop looking at me like that, I thought with a tired smile, and then I headed over to Gadino and the rest of his crew. Oh, you're awake, Sigvard, I said as I drew closer. Are you feeling all right? More or less, Sigvard replied. He still seemed a little under the weather, but I had a feeling he'd recuperate the moment he saw what I'd brought him. We'll be exploring the dungeon from tomorrow onward, so I thought we might as well get in a drink or two while we still can, I said as I brought out a few bottles of beer, the extra fancy sort that people give as gifts, and gave them out to Gadino, Gideon, and Sigvard. Ooh, you're up for sharing, Mukouda? Gadino asked. Honestly, I can't believe we get to drink at all in a place like this. What could be better? Gideon added. Woohoo! Sigvard shouted. Booze. You've done it again, Mukouda. My offer of drinks had sent all three of them over the moon. Clearly, none of them had ever imagined that they'd be able to have any out here in the wilderness. Drinks. May I join you, my liege? Asked Gun, who'd proven to have a taste for booze as well. If you insist, I said, and then I poured some beer into a deep, wide dish for him. It took a lot more than just one bottle to completely fill it, of course, but that's just how it went sometimes. And here, Theodora. I think you'll be more into this, I added as I brought out a bottle of slightly fancy, undiluted apple juice. Theodora downed her glass in an instant, then gasped for breath and grinned. I'm guessing you three want some as well, right? I said, pouring bowls of the same apple juice for Fel, Dora-chan, and Sway. Okay. Next up, here's dinner. I placed a sesame-flavored pork and cabbage bowl in front of each member of our current party. My gluttonous quartet, plus one equally gluttonous elf, dug in without waiting for so much as a second. Thanks for this, Mukouda, Gadino said. Gods, this looks good, Gideon exclaimed. And judging by the scent, it'll go perfectly with this booze, Sigvard noted. You've got that right, I said. This dish and beer are a match made in heaven. I went ahead and cracked open a bottle of beer for myself as well, then took a big bite of my rice bowl. Now that hits the spot. It was salty and sweet, and the sesame flavor elevated the whole experience to addictive new heights. I wolfed down a few more bites, then took a lengthy swig of beer. Delicious, I exclaimed. I knew a beer would be perfect with this. So good. Seconds, at once. For me as well. Oh, and I wouldn't say no to another drink either, my liege. Get another goin' for me too. Sway too. And Sway wants another drink. My familiars pushed their now empty dishes toward me in unison. You too, Herr Theodora? Also, you should really wipe your mouth. You've got rice all over it. Ever consider showing some restraint, Theodora? Gideon shouted. Theodora, however, didn't even seem to notice his jab, or if she did notice, she didn't care. There's nothing that woman cares about more than a good meal, Gadino sighed. And to think, she'd be the perfect party member if it weren't for that, Sigvard added. It's fine, honestly. I'm used to cooking for 4 of the heaviest eaters you'll ever meet, so I made more than enough for her to have seconds. I'm just glad to see someone enjoying my food that much, I reassured them as I refilled Theodora's bowl. Do you guys want more too? Gadino, Gideon, and Sigvard hesitated for a moment before giving in and accepting their own refills. Then, a moment later. Think I could trouble you for another one of these as well, Mukouda? Sigvard said with a hopeful air as he shook his empty beer bottle. I guess the alcohol's the main event for you, huh? I chuckled. Oh, for the I'd better not hear you complain about Theodora's appetite from now on, Sigvard, Gadino said. No kidding, Gideon agreed with a roll of his eyes. Ha ha ha. How am I supposed to help myself when his booze is this good? Sigvard said. I snickered as I listened to them banter and handed another bottle over to Sigvard. Just don't go too hard on this stuff. We have a dungeon to explore tomorrow, remember? Oh, believe me, I know, Sigvard said before chugging his second beer as quickly as he had his first one. After that, Gadino, Gideon, and Sigvard fell into a highly enthusiastic discussion about the dungeon we'd be crawling come morning. My familiars were just as excited, of course, but I had to wonder, would we really be all right? If the dungeon was truly untouched, then the way I saw it, there was no telling what we might find in there. I do hope that I'm just worrying for no reason, but still, even with Fel, Gan, Dora-chan, and Sway's incredible might on my side, I couldn't help but worry a little about what was to come. There's something really special about this miso soup, Gadino said as he slurped away at his broth, which was filled with bits of cabbage, onion, and deep-fried tofu. I know what you mean. It's relaxing, for some reason, Gideon agreed. I'm leaning toward these rolled armlets, myself, Sigvard said. They're so soft, and their flavor, it's so good, I can't even describe it, he added, then popped another piece of armlet into his mouth. You're not wrong about that, Gadino agreed, tearing himself away from his soup for long enough to grab a piece of armlet as well. I mean, really, everything Mukouda makes is incredible, said Gideon, who was busy stuffing himself with rice balls that I'd made using a rice seasoning mixture I bought from my online supermarket, mustard leaf-based, in this particular case. True, Gadino and Sigvard both agreed with emphatic nods. It was a rather light and perfectly pedestrian breakfast as far as I was concerned, but I had to admit, I didn't mind the compliments. My familiars demanded meat-heavy meals starting first thing in the morning, but I assumed that ARC's members would find that diet just as hard on the stomach as I did, so I had prepared the same comparatively light food for them that I'd made for myself. I had made their servings a fair bit larger than mine, though they all had pretty athletic builds, and I figured they'd be heavy eaters. Oh, and while Theodora was the group's only slim member, I knew for a fact that she was the heaviest eater of them all, so I had upped her serving size as well. Of course, she had still polished off her breakfast before I knew it, and I ended up making her 3 additional rice balls as well. It seriously felt like I hadn't had time to blink before she had finished everything and started giving my familiars and their cockatrice teriyaki bowls an openly envious stare. I know the food was on the lighter side this time, Theodora, but that doesn't mean you can just keep stuffing your face with it. And why are you getting so jealous over their massive meat piles? Maybe I misread things, and adventuring has a way of making people want to eat tons of meat first thing in the morning? I thought, in spite of the fact that I was, technically, an adventurer myself. So, I can't stand eating a ton of meat in the morning, and I made you guys the same thing as me since I figured you'd feel the same way, I said. Was I wrong about that? Would you guys have preferred something more meat-heavy for breakfast? No, not at all, Gedino said. I'm right there with you. Lighter food's just right for the mornings. Same here, Gideon agreed. Maybe when I was a lad, but these days, I lean toward lighter breakfasts as well, Sigvard said. Okay, I guess I was right after all, with one likely exception, anyway. I get the feeling Theodora would have preferred meat, though, I said as I glanced over at the elf, who was still staring intently at my familiars. The other 3 members of ARC shook their heads. We are not like her, believe me, Gedino said. I've seen that woman order 2 servings of steak first thing in the morning, and polish them both off without batting an eyelash. A figure like that, and she eats more than any of us. It just doesn't make sense, Gideon said. Pretty sure her stomach's forged from magic iron, Sigvard commented. Okay, that's going a little too far, isn't it? But then again, considering how long they've known each other, I'm guessing he's speaking from an awful lot of experience. I need you to do something about this elf, Fel telepathically grumbled at that precise moment. She's been staring at us this whole time, Gun explained. And it's really starting to get on my nerves, Dora-chan added. She's looking at our food and drooling, Sway noted. I'm almost impressed. It takes a lot to make the gluttonous quartet complain like that, Theodora. Hey, Theodora, I said as I held out a cockatrice teriyaki bowl. Her gaze locked onto it in an instant, and when I moved it from side to side, her head swiveled to track its motion. Heh. Okay, this is kinda fun, I thought as I moved the bowl all over the place and watched Theodora pivot her head in every direction to match. Wait, whoops. What am I even doing right now? We shouldn't be gorging ourselves right before we go into a dungeon, so just 1 bowl, okay? I said. Theodora nodded repeatedly, and when I passed her the teriyaki bowl, her face lit up with an ecstatic smile. Sorry Theodora's being such a hassle, Gadino said with a chuckle. Honestly, I don't know what to do with her, Gideon sighed. It's an obsession, Sigvard added. Nothing can pry that woman away from tasty food, no matter how hard you try. Theodora finished her food off, licked the bowl clean, and looked pretty downcast over it all being gone, but I stuck to my word and refrained from offering her any more. Having ARC's members around had once again made our meal time a little more eventful than usual, but still, it wasn't long before breakfast was finished. We took a moment to collect ourselves, and then it was finally time. Let us be off, then. I do hope there's good meat to be found within the dungeon. Right. You've got your priorities straight, Gan. Sway wants to pew-pew loots and lots of baddies. My familiars and I stepped into the dungeon in our usual carefree fashion, accompanied by the grim-faced and completely professional members of ARC. Okay, that's different. What water? Nobody said anything about there being water. Oh ho. Yes, this is a twist. Interesting. Hot damn, guys. You know what this means. Fish is on the menu. Fishes, yay. Sway wonders if there'll be meat too. While my familiars and I chatted about our first impression of the dungeon, the members of ARC just stood there in horrified silence. Even Theodora, who was usually pretty laid back, was grimacing for once. I couldn't exactly blame them, to be fair, considering what we were looking at. When we had first entered the dungeon, we proceeded through a cave-like tunnel for some time. Eventually we'd reached a staircase, at the bottom of which we had been greeted by the sight of, well, water. A lot of water. In fact, the entire area was inundated with green-hued fluid. I'd seen a program on TV once about the largest marshland on Earth, and the scenery before me was remarkably reminiscent of that region. A marshland in a dungeon, I muttered. And it's enormous, to boot. Gah. Fell growled, immediately indignant at the sight of his least favorite element. I was led to believe there would be a wilderness within. Did that fool of a priest lie to us? Well, I mean, there are some plants and stuff, I guess. See the shrubs over there? I pointed out. Chimpy. That is hardly. And besides, I continued, cutting Fell off, the war master who told us about this place hadn't even been inside to see for himself, had he? All the details he gave us were based off of rumors and hearsay, and he told us that, so it's not like he was lying, even if he was a little wrong. Fell let out an irritated harumph, and I sighed. Well, we can always turn back if you're that upset. I wouldn't complain, that's for sure, I said. In fact, nothing would make me happier than calling off this dungeon crawl before it even begins. We will not turn back under any circumstances, Fell barked. Well, then quit whining and deal with it. Just then, Gadino stepped in to interrupt our little spat. Sorry to cut you off, Mukouda, but we've got a problem. There's a fire boar headed our way, he said. I glanced over in the direction Gadino had gestured and spotted what looked like an enormous boar, staring right at us with its teeth bared. Then I blinked, did a double take, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Wait, no, boars aren't supposed to have that kind of teeth. Why are they so sharp? Theodora, Gideon, Sigvard, Gadino called out, stepping right into his role as Ark's leader. Theodora narked an arrow, taking aim at the fire boar, while Gadino, Gideon, and Sigvard drew their weapons. No sooner had Ark taken up their battle formation than the fire boar rushed toward us with an ear-piercing battle squeal. I had taken a step back behind Fell and Gan, just to be on the safe side, and was looking forward to seeing how Gadino's party would conduct themselves in battle. But, yeah, that didn't happen. Swale beat them, my favorite slime squealed as it bounced forward and let an acid bullet fly with a mighty pew. The bullet slammed directly into and through the boar's forehead, but the big, bulky creature had quite a bit of momentum built up from its charge that kept carrying it forward until it finally collapsed just a few feet in front of Ark's formation. Silence fell. Ark's members stared at the fire boar in blank incomprehension. Yippee! Sway won. Sway shouted with glee, overjoyed by its victory. Yeah, sorry, Ark. Like, really, sorry. Sway isn't intentionally ruining the mood, it just doesn't know any better, honestly. And so, our co-exploration of the dungeon with Ark kicked off with a bang. Unfortunately, the expedition's prospects were looking pretty grim already, in terms of awkwardness, anyway. There we were, out in the marshland of the hotly anticipated dungeon's first floor, if this dungeon even had floors in the traditional sense at all, which I was still far from certain about. We were all currently riding on Sway, who had grown to a massive size to serve as our raft again. We normally rode on Fell anytime we had a large, wide-open field level to get through, but he had straight-up vetoed that option on account of the wetlands. We'd considered riding Gen instead, but the prospect of dismounting and mounting him again every single time a monster turned up just seemed like too much of a hassle, so we had ruled that option out as well. In the end, we had chosen Sway as our method of transportation by process of elimination. And while the rest of us were sailing through the massive marsh, Team Dragon, that is, Gan and Dora-chan, flew ahead to scout out the area and point out any monsters they could find from above. As a side note, after that first incident, we had taken a moment to explain to Sway that kill stealing was very much not proper dungeon etiquette. This was far from the first time we'd had that conversation with the slime, of course, but it seemed that the excitement of a new dungeon had gotten the better of it. In any case, we had offered Ark the monster's drops, a pelt and a tusk, as an apology for my familiar's poor manners, and they'd been very understanding. It wasn't the perfect start to the trip, but one way or another, Our expedition was finally underway. We hadn't found much so far, though. We had sighted a few bird-like creatures here and there that looked like waterfowl to me, but they had all flown away long before we could get close to them. Gan and Dora-chan hadn't reported back yet either, so I figured they were only seeing small creatures that weren't worth pursuing. As we carried on, however, I started noticing a fair number of creatures that looked an awful lot like capybaras. They were way bigger than the capybaras that I knew, but since Team Dragon hadn't mentioned them, I assumed that they weren't worth hunting. "Hey, think I found some half-decent monsters," Dora-chan finally chimed in telepathically. "A river lies ahead of you, and a fair number of small alligators reside in the vicinity," Gan added. "Got it. Wait for us, okay?" I sent back, and then I looked over at Fel and down at Sway. "You guys got all that, right?" "Quite. Alligators, was it? I suppose they will have to suffice." "Gators. Swale beat them up." I turned to Ark next. "Apparently there's a river with a bunch of alligator monsters around it just up ahead," I explained. "All right," Gadino said. "Alligator monsters usually drop hides, teeth, and meat, so that seems worthwhile. There are apparently a lot of them, so how about we split up into 2 teams and hunt separately?" I suggested. "That sounds like a plan. We're in this together, sure, but it'll probably be easier to coordinate in battle if we're fighting with the teams we're used to." "Oh, good. I knew he'd understand." "You 3 are okay with that, right?" he then asked, looking over at Gideon, Sigvard, and Theodora, all of whom nodded in confirmation. They all looked determined and serious as could be, the very picture of a proper adventuring team, really, which is to say, nothing whatsoever like me and my crew. We rendezvoused with Gan and Dora-chan a short distance away from the river, where I found the situation to be a bit more than I'd been bargaining for. "Now that's a lot of gators," I muttered to myself. Each of them was around 5 meters long, and there were so many both in and around the river that I immediately gave up on even trying to count them. "I'm sorry, Gan, but didn't you call them small alligators? What part of those things looks small to you?" "Ha ha ha. Oh, aren't those red-tailed caimans?" Sigvard noted as he looked out over the river. He was familiar with them, it seemed, and now that he mentioned it, I noticed that they did have distinctively red tails. "Caimans, though? Really? I wasn't exactly an expert, but I'd thought that caimans were supposed to be on the smaller side of the gator spectrum. I suppose they are small, though, by this world's standards. Considering the size of all the other ones I've encountered up until now, I probably should have seen that coming." "Red-tailed caimans, eh? Their meat and their hides fetch a pretty good price, don't they?" Gadino asked. "Sure do," Gideon confirmed. "We'll be in for a major windfall if we manage to take down at least 3 of them." "No, we should aim higher than that," Sigvard said. "It's high time that all 3 of us replaced our armor, so we could use the spare funding." "Can't argue with that," Gideon admitted. "Sounds like we're going all out this time, then," Gadino said. "We'll go with the usual opener. Can you handle it, Theodora?" "Of course," Theodora said with a nod. I couldn't help but get a little worked up as I listened to Ark's discussion. It felt like they were real, proper adventurers, and that thought put me in a childishly excited state of mind. "All right, Mukouda, time for us to split up," Gadino said. "I'd say take care of yourself, but I'm pretty sure you've got that under control already." "Thanks, and you too," I replied. Ark's adventurers gave us a wave, and then set off toward the riverside cluster of red-tailed caimans. "Okay, let's get moving too," I said. "I hardly see the need to bother dealing with foes as petty as these," Fel huffed. "Oh, quit share griping," Dora-chan snapped. "This is just the start. There's a whole dungeon to explore after this." "Indeed," Gun said with a nod. "I understand your position, to be sure, but this is only the beginning." "Right." I agreed. Plus, Gadino just said something about their meat selling for a high price, so it's got to be pretty tasty. I bet I could make some really good gator carriage in a pinch. Suddenly, my familiars froze up. Then, a moment later, Karagi. Sway squealed as it barreled toward the red-tailed caimans like a massive, amorphous cannonball. What the swee? I yelped. It was all I could do to cling to the slime's body and do my best to not get flung off into the bog. If there is courage in the offing, then this is no time to sit still. I shall join in the hunt, Fell said, then gracefully leapt from Sway's back and charged out ahead of it, racing toward the alligators. Hold on a sec, Dora-chan said. If we take out the ones in the river, won't the meat they drop end up in the drink? A fair point, Gun admitted. In that case, I will grab the riverbound gators and drop them onto the shore. You can finish them off once they're on dry land, Dora. You got it. Huh. Since when were those two so good at working together? Does being dragons just naturally put them on the same page, or something? Taka this. I felt Sway jiggle beneath me as a resounding pew rang out. Gah. Swee. I yelped. Because the slime was in its giant form, the acid bullet it had just expelled was much, much larger than usual. The shot slammed into one of the red-tailed caimans, practically blasting it in two. The monster let out a gurgle of shock, then vanished into thin air, leaving behind. Boo, no meat, Sway whined as a gator hide fell to the ground. Don't worry, it's fine, I said. There are still plenty of gators to go around. I'm sure some of them will leave meat behind for us. Okay. Then Sway'll beat up lots and lots of them. Take this, and this, and this. While Sway was occupied with gunning down one red-tailed caiman after another, I slid down from its back. Oh, Sway, I sighed, reflecting on what an adorable, innocent little slime it had been back when we had first met. Seeing it act this bloodthirsty made me feel more than a little wistful. Fell, meanwhile, was further up ahead, tearing through every red-tailed caiman he could get his claws on in a truly horrific massacre. Gun and Dora-chan were working in perfect tandem as well. Gun had grown a little larger than before, and was lifting the monsters out of the river two at a time, dropping them onto the bank where Dora-chan used ice magic to skewer them to death. It felt like I'd peeked into a red-tailed caiman slaughterhouse. My familiars kept up their violent work for some time, hunting down the red-tailed caimans for every last piece of loot they could possibly secure. I never would have imagined that the word courage could bring about this much carnage. It was chaos, pure and simple, and it didn't take long at all for the last red-tailed caiman to be slain, leaving only a mountain of drops littering the riverside in their place. I sighed heavily. Well, we all know the dungeon routine at this point. Let's pick up these drops. You guys help out too, okay? But of course. They are to become our courage, so we shall assist to the best of our ability. Quite. We shan't leave a single piece of meat behind. That's right. Karagi. I gave Fell and Dora-chan a magic bag each, and they split up to go collect drops, with Gun accompanying Dora-chan and Sway tagging along with Fell. Okay, can't let them do all the work, especially considering how much there is to get done. Geez. Why do things always turn out like this? I muttered to myself, then glanced over at my familiars. Wait a minute, guys. Pick up all the drops, not just the meat. My gluttonous quartet, it seemed, had decided that the hides and teeth weren't worth their time, and had been ignoring them entirely in favor of the gator meat until I scolded them. Come on, sheesh. It'd be a total waste to just leave them there, I grumbled as I helped out with the task. I scooped up a lump of meat, a hide, some teeth, more meat, another hide. The work seemed endless. Ag, my back's killing me, I groaned, thumping on my lower back like a genuine senior citizen. Just then, a voice rang out from behind me. Mukouda. I turned around to find that Ark's adventurers had returned and were now standing there, gaping at the still massive quantity of drops that we had yet to collect. You are, Everyone got a little worked up, see, I said, stammering out a feeble excuse. We killed 4 of them. Thought that was a real good note to start the expedition off on, Gideon said with a faraway look in his eyes. Why yeah, I began, then gave up. So, it's gonna take me a while to pick up all these drops. Can you wait for just a bit? I sent out a telepathic order to my familiars, also known as the perpetrators of this incredibly awkward moment, instructing them to double time it and get those drops picked up as fast as possible. Phew. Finally done, I said when we'd finished gathering the vast majority of the gator materials. My relief, however, was short-lived. Chem. It would seem we missed one, Fell commented. I followed his gaze and found a single red-tailed caiman, floating leisurely out on the river. So we did. I'll go capture it, Gun said. Gun soared into the air, descended upon the gator, and grabbed it in his claws. But then, just as he was about to ascend once more, an ear-splitting splash rang out as an enormous fish broke the surface. It wouldn't have held a candle to Gun at his full size, but at around 10 meters long, it was just about as big as his current, shrunken form. More importantly, it had jumped out of the river with a purpose, and clamped its jaws around the red-tailed caiman that Gun was currently grasping with one forelimb. Trying to steal my prey? Well, aren't you an insolent one? Gun growled as he reached down and wrapped his other forelimb's claws around the fish's head as well. Gun flapped his wings, carrying him into the air along with the red-tailed caiman and the fish, which was now frantically flailing its tail. It was too late, though, in fact, its fate had been sealed the instant it decided to pick a fight with an all-powerful ancient dragon. The fish was completely incapable of freeing its head from Gun's grasp, and by the time he arrived back at the riverside, his razor-sharp claws had already done it in. Look, my liege. I set out for a gator, and returned with a fish, Gun said as he presented the massive corpse to me. Right, okay, and what do you expect me to do with it? I thought, then glanced over at Ark, only to find that they'd once again been stunned into a dumbfounded silence. Soon enough, the fish that Gun had brought back for me vanished, replaced by its drop items. I'd been so caught off guard that I had neglected to appraise the thing, but I figured it wasn't that big of a deal. As for the drops themselves, a huge slab of white fish flesh, a magic stone, and a treasure chest, huh? Gun finished the thing off without breaking a sweat, but I guess it might have been a pretty high-ranking monster after all. I muttered, then started appraising the drops. First up was the slab of flesh. Emperor Dorado flesh. A cut of fish that is mildly flavored, but rich in umami. Exceptionally delicious, thanks in part to the soft, flaky texture it takes on when cooked. I guess this stuff's supposed to be soft, flaky, and exceptionally delicious, I explained to my familiars. Oh, and how would you go about cooking it? Gun asked. I was thinking of using it in a hot pot. A hot pot? Yes, that is compelling, said Fell, who was already drooling. Ooh, yeah, I like the sound of that. Those re always awesome, Dora-chan agreed. Sway loves hot pots, Sway said, immediately shifting into hot pot mode as well. What is a hot pot? Gun asked. Oh, right. I guess I haven't made one of those since he joined up with us. It's a style of cooking where you put a pot of broth out on the table and simmer a bunch of different ingredients in it, I explained. So you keep simmering the food, even as you eat? Gun said, sounding a little perplexed. It seemed he was having a hard time imagining the process. Yeah, and the last thing you do is dump a bunch of noodles or whatever into the leftover broth to finish it all off. It's seriously awesome, Dora-chan said. It's really, really yummy, Sway agreed. Noodles, or whatever. Finish it all off, Gun repeated, more confused than ever. I guess this is just one of those things where you have to try it yourself to really get it. I'll have to make a hot pot for him one of these days, I thought. I was ready to let the subject drop there, but my familiars were far from finished. Well then, it is settled. Our next meal shall be a hot pot. I'm down for that. Sway is too. What? No, wait, I already made a ton of meals for this trip. I was gonna keep the cooking quick and easy while we were in here, I protested. Quick and easy? Fell scoffed. Preposterous. We have obtained a fine ingredient, so it is only natural that we partake of it immediately. Only natural, my foot. The fish isn't going to vanish if we don't eat it right away, Fell. I must admit, after everything I've heard, I find myself wanting to try a hot pot myself, my liege, Gun said. Arg, I knew it. Those three have infected Gun. Now he's in hot pot mode too. I want it too, a voice rang out from behind me. Theodora, I sighed as I turned around. Her eyes were glimmering with anticipation, and it was completely obvious that she had overheard Fell and Gun. Damn it, Theodora, could you get any more shameless? Gadino shouted. Theodora, of course, didn't even seem to hear him. Hey, Mukouda, do you have an appraisal skill? Gideon asked. The way you were talking about that fish just now sure made it sound like you do. Gideon's question caught me totally unprepared, and I knew for a fact that I had failed to keep a straight face. You've got an item box too, and a big one at that, Gideon continued. What are you, some sort of hero? He was getting dangerously close to the truth of the matter, and beads of cold sweat were starting to drip down my brow. I wasn't a hero, technically, but I most certainly had been summoned from another world in the same way that heroes were. Cut that out, Gideon, Sigvard snapped with a scowl. You should know better than to go prying into another man's skills. That's right, Gadino agreed. It's not the adventurer way. I know. I just thought he might actually be a hero and got curious, that's all, Gideon sighed. Always wanted to meet one of those, he added under his breath. PFF. Really? You're into heroes? What, did you want to be one when you grew up? Sigvard said. Oh, sure, laugh it up. Gideon shouted. I had a picture book about heroes when I was a kid, and it got stuck in my head, okay? And yes, that is why I became an adventurer. I'm not the only one either. Most folks in our line of work have some sort of story along those lines, as far as I can tell. Ha ha ha. Gadino chuckled. You're not wrong about that, but still, I never took you for the sort to chase fantasies for a living. Gideon's face turned beet red as Sigvard and Gadino poked fun at him. I, meanwhile, let out a sigh of relief. Looks like I managed to throw him off the trail. I've got a funny feeling that he still suspects I'm a hero on some level, though. There is still ample time before we must stop for lunch. Let us carry on with our hunt, Fell barked. And so, we climbed onto Sway's back and set off through the marshlands once again. Oh, and incidentally, the treasure chest that the Emperor Dorado dropped ended up containing 5 golden scales the size of my palm, plus a small emerald and ruby. Now, Theodora, Gadino shouted. At his command, Theodora drew and loosed an arrow in a single fluid motion, sending it whizzing toward Ark's current foe, a blue-headed otter. It was a C-ranked monster that looked quite a bit like an ordinary otter, with the exception of the patch of blue fur on its head. Oh, and also the fact that it was way bigger than the otters I knew, and significantly more vicious to boot. The blue-headed otter let out a terrible screech as Theodora's arrow nailed it directly in its eye. Your turn, Sigvard, Gadino yelled. On it. Gra, the dwarf bellowed as he sent his prized warhammer hurtling into the monster's head with a thunderous crash. Here we go, Gideon, Gadino said as he went on the attack. Right beside you, Gideon shouted. The two of them charged forward in unison, Gadino swinging his bastard sword toward the blue-headed otter's neck while Gideon jammed his spear into its flank. Their combo attack finished it off in an instant and the monster disappeared, leaving behind a pelt to reward them. Oh, I cooed in admiration as I gave them a round of applause. Yes, now that's what adventurers are supposed to look like. What about this are you so pleased by? Fell asked with an irritated frown. What is there to be gained by defeating such a piddling foe? More than you might expect, I countered. That monster's pelt is supposed to be waterproof, which means it'll sell for a really good price. Gadino had noticed the blue-headed otter off in the distance as we rode Sway across the bog, and had practically begged me to stop so that he and his party could hunt it down. Blue-headed otter pelts were highly sought after thanks to their waterproof nature, and were quite scarce as well, meaning they'd likely fetch quite a large sum of money. Hunting them also posed little to no danger for an A-ranked party like Ark, which made them an even more attractive target. Ark's adventurers had climbed off of Sway and hustled over to take the blue-headed otter down. I had asked Fel and Sway if they wanted to join in the hunt, but Fel had told me that I see no need to face a creature so feeble. Also, their meat is disgusting. That had turned Sway off the prospect as well. If their meat wasn't tasty, it just wasn't interested. Well, I guess my party's hunting standards are consistent. If it's tasty, they're in, and if not, they couldn't care less. In the end, Fel and I had waited and watched the fight from atop Sway. Well, I watched them, anyway. Sway had nodded off almost immediately, and Fel seemed totally disinterested and closed his eyes as well. I was the only one who found observing Ark's fighting style worthwhile, and I watched with bated breath. They battled with perfect coordination, and it felt like I was watching a scene from a movie play out before my eyes. Part of me had always wished that I could fight like they did, but when I paused to consider whether I'd actually be able to pull it off. Yeah, nah. No way that's ever happening, I said with a shake of my head. I was a coward, and I knew it. Having a crew of powerful party members to travel with suited me way better. Nothing beats peace of mind, after all, I thought as I glanced over at Fel. What? Oh, nothing. Just thinking about how lucky I am to be traveling with you guys, I said. What brought this on? I mean, when all's said and done, the only reason why I can more or less keep my cool in a place like this is because you guys are so tough. Of course, I also wouldn't be in a place like this to begin with if I'd never met them. It seems you know your place well, then. You should indeed be thankful, Fel said. Ha ha ha. Yeah, I sure am, I chuckled. Chem? What? It seems Gan and Dora have returned. I glanced in the direction Fel was looking and saw a black dot off in the distance. Gun and Dora-chan had flown off to scout out the dungeon on their own again, and it looked like they were on their way back. Hey, wait a second. Is it just me, or is Gun carrying something? I observed as Gun drew closer. He seemed to be holding something long and narrow in one of his forelimbs. Hey. Figured it was just about lunchtime, so we headed back, Dora-chan said as he touched down a few seconds ahead of Gun. What's that thing that Gun's carrying, Dora-chan? I asked. Oh, that. Just a little souvenir for you. What now? I asked, cocking my head. Before Dora-chan could answer, however, I looked back and let out a grunt of revulsion. Gun was finally close enough for me to clearly see what he was holding. A long, green snake, its body as thick as a tree trunk, still writhing in his grasp. We found a creature that would make reasonable prey, so I bought it back as a gift for you, my liege, Gun said as he landed. I just stared at it. Okay, but what am I supposed to do with it now? I tried to keep a straight face as I appraised the snake. Green hunter anaconda. An A-ranked monster. Their distinctive coloration serves as camouflage, allowing them to blend in with undergrowth and sneak up on their prey, which they then brutally devour. The color of their skin is prized by certain individuals of peculiar taste, and often fetches a high price. Their meat is simple in flavor, but delicious nevertheless. I guess it's supposed to taste good, I said. Is that so? Well then, hurry up and finish it off, said Fel, reacting the same way he always did to the prospect of a tasty meal. Finish it off? You mean, like, me? I asked. Of course. Gun brought it here for that precise purpose. Did you not? Quite, yes. I thought it would be the perfect opportunity for you to level yourself up. I would have really preferred if he hadn't gone to the trouble, but considering the deed was done, it didn't feel right to refuse. For the record, if you wanted to bring me a souvenir, you could have gone with drop items instead. I gave Dora-chan a magic bag for a reason, you know? Huh. Oh, yeah, I brought back a ton of that stuff in here too, Dora-chan said, gesturing at the magic bag around his neck. Well, that's just great, but the point is that you could have also given me this snake's drops instead of the whole thing. We are wasting time. Okay, I get it. Don't rush me, I said. It really seemed like I didn't have a choice, So I brought my mithril spear out from my item box and faced the snake down. "Fear not, my liege," Gun said. "I will hold down the snake's head, so you'll be in no danger. Go on. It should only take a single thrust through the cranium." "All right," I said, and then I took a deep breath. "Come on, Mukouda. Man up. You can do this. Hiya." I felt like my legs were going to give out from beneath me, but still, I managed to send my spear plunging into the snake's skull. It fell still in an instant, then disappeared, leaving behind a lump of meat and a segment of green snakeskin. The job was done, and I let out a sigh of relief, but then I noticed that ARC's members had, in fact, just returned from their blue-headed otter hunt. "Mukouda," Gadino said, before falling into an awkward silence. All four of them looked incredibly uncomfortable. "Just so you know, Mukouda, you'll never be a fighter if you keep training like that," Sigvard commented. Gadino and Gideon nodded in vigorous agreement, and for once, Theodora abandoned her aloof persona for long enough to join them. "Heh! Oh God! Just how much of that did they see? It's not what you think, guys. I don't make a habit of grinding experience like this, I swear."